Crochet Circle podcast is sponsored by Linrow Knitting and Crochet and Knit It, Hook It, Craft It. Links to both businesses can be found within our show notes.
Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to episode 4 of the Crochet Circle podcast, which is called A Crochet Journey. In this episode we have Yay Crochet or Nay Crochet. We've put together some helpful hints on how to get started on a crochet journey. So we'll be starting from the very beginning and talking about how to choose or substitute yarn for a project. I have a yarn review of Manastel Uruguay Merino, and Faye is myth busting. She's looking at knitting versus crochet and the amounts of yarn used. We have our usual magazine roundup. We've got our whip wall update and our finished objects, and we'll be sharing a snippet of information on a secret crochet circle project. And we'll finish off with what's good. Just wanted to say thank you for helping us to reach over 1,100 downloads on Podbean. It's far more than we'd hoped for. We've only put 3 episodes out there and we've had some really great feedback from listeners.
Lovely interaction as well, really nice.
We've got a great discussion going on Ravelry, some lovely people on there. We've had some great reviews, so thanks if you've written any reviews on your blogs. Thank you to Catherine at Crafternoon Treats, who actually mentions us in a couple of episodes of her Crafternoon Treats blog, in episodes 7 and 8. And also thanks to Tamara, who gave us a lovely review and made me laugh on her website. She's got a website called Crafty Escapism, and I just loved Tamara's summary of Faye and myself.
She's got us pinned.
She has.
Pretty perfect, hasn't she? I'm the naughty one that instigates trouble and yarn buying, and you're way more sensible than I am.
She says, Faye likes to shop, but Lynn is frugal like myself. So I'm going to show that to my husband.
Blame me.
Yes. Faye is a bad influence on Lynn. It's like a school report, actually.
No, it sounds just like one of my school
It
reports.
sounds like one of mine.
Faye is naughty. Faye has always been naughty.
Tamara says that listening to Faye is starting to influence my shopping habits, she says. So just be warned. There are downsides to our crochet podcast. You may be encouraged to buy more yarn.
But it's about quality, not necessarily quantity.
That's very true. You also may have spotted us in Crochet Now, Let's Knit magazine, and also in Simply Crochet.
Yeah, it's really nice of them to cover the podcast, and hopefully more listeners will come across us because of that.
Yeah,
the column inches, it's very nice. And we also have a really nice review on iTunes from Trinket Knits, so thank you to you. It's really, we didn't expect it. It was lovely to go onto iTunes and see that somebody liked our podcast and liked it enough to go on and provide a review.
Yeah, so it's just really nice to feel that people are listening to us, and that hopefully we're providing some useful, enjoyable information, fun hour. So we'll move on to Yay Crochet or Nay Crochet. And Faye, what do you have this month?
I have an A.
Okay.
My A is lace weight yarn. I really love lace weight. I love the feel of it. I love how light it is. I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings fan, and when I'm knitting or crocheting with lace weight, I kind of think that's what Mithril must feel like. But I was having to use a 2.75mm hook and needles, and it just took forever. So I think the way around that would be for me to find a way of doubling up with lace weight so it's a quicker project. And that's not a downside on lace weight and people that produce the most amazing yarns. It's more that I prefer a little more instant gratification. It's about the speed at which I expect something to grow rather than an issue with the yarn itself. But it was a very good lesson for me, because next time I think I'm going to be swayed by lace weight yarn in a shop or a bargain bin, there's no point, because it's most likely just going to sit in my stash. So it was a really good learning point. Lace weight yarn probably isn't for me unless I move up a hook size and just have a more lacy project overall. But frankly, anything below a 3mm hook other than knitting socks is probably not going to grab my attention. So actually I take that back. It's not about lace weight yarn, it's about the fact that I don't want to use anything below a 3mm hook.
It's size.
And I don't mind knitting socks on 2.5mm, so I understand that, but I do that on little needles, and it just took too long to get to where I wanted to be. So that's my knee.
So that's your nay, Faye. Well, I have a yay crochet. Last week was the last of a series of 5 Learn to Crochet classes at Sandbach Adult Education Programme. So Sandbach is in Cheshire, and I've been doing my evening classes there now for maybe about 4 or 5 years. I've do both knitting and crochet classes there, and I've just met the loveliest people along the way. I had a wide range of ages this time. It was really nice. So I had a younger lady, I'd say she was probably in her late 20s, up to a lady who was 79.
Wow.
Yeah, and she actually came on a bike. She came with her daughter, and then there was another lady who said she'd been trying to teach herself to crochet for about 40 years, so she was absolutely made up.
Brilliant.
We learned all the basics of crochet, and we made things like flowers and granny squares. I think we tackled ripple stitch and just some very simple shelf stitches. And what I like about teaching people to crochet when you have a series of classes that are sort of over a 5-week period is that each week, so we have a 2-hour class, you can kind of go away, have a little practice, have a little play around, get yourself a bit more familiar. But then my pupils come back in the following week and they've got all these lovely things that they've made just after a couple of hours of crochet.
It's very inspiring.
Yeah. You know, they'd all brought things in. I've had this magazine for ages and I've started this, and I took some photographs. So it just makes me feel really happy when they say how much they've enjoyed it. If you want to learn to crochet, I would say you can try and teach yourself from, lots of the magazines that we review each month have great how-to sections in them, and you can buy some really great books as well. But sometimes the physical teaching is just a little bit more helpful, so if you can get along to a local class, I'd say go, it's worth the money.
I'd tried on YouTube before I went to your class actually, and it took me too long to stop, rewind, even on some of the better ones that did it in slow motion or did a repeat of the same stitch. It just wasn't conducive to the way that I learn. I'm much better as a hands-on person, and that was what really changed my life completely, was being able to learn to crochet and knit, but to do it with somebody in front of me who could spot my mistakes and give me really decent feedback.
So that was a yay crochet for adult education programs, I
really
think,
nice.
Overall. Yes. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about an idea that Faye and I had about taking you through a crochet project from start to finish. Yeah. So we've decided that we will each start a crochet garment, maybe 2.
I'm going out there. I'm doing 2.
I'm doing 2 actually. I've decided.
That's it. You said it. It's recorded.
Aiming to wear our garments at Yarndale,
which is the end of September.
So we've got quite a while. Okay, so you can join in 2, so it's a little bit like a crochet along, but there's nothing specific. You can choose your own garment that you think is going to turn out into a stylish, nice, contemporary piece of crochet.
So it could be a shawl,
anything.
Top like we're doing, whatever you fancy. We would just like to see what you're making. And something wearable.
Yeah, something wearable, and also it'd be nice to see, I think everyone always has a different idea of what is stylish and what isn't, so it'd be nice to see a nice mix of different people's projects. So we're going to look at each stage of the crochet journey. We're going to talk about how to choose or substitute yarn, and we're also going to talk about your swatch and whether or not you should block it. We're not going to talk about actually making a swatch because we did that last time with the tension square, so I can put a link back to that in the show notes. So then in upcoming episodes we'll talk about things like how to finish your project and the best ways to sew the pieces together. We'll talk about how to wash or block your project before you wear it, so that you make sure the stitches just look exactly as they should look. We'll talk about wearing and using your crocheted garment and aftercare, and also dealing with any disasters like any little holes or anything you might need to darn at the end. So it's a crochet journey which links to the title of this episode. So I think I got my choice really down to 3. One of them was Joanne Scrace's Aberfoyle cardigan in her recent publication with Kat Golding called 3 from the Top. So it's a top-down cardigan, and I do like it, I really like it, but when I looked in my stash I just didn't have any yarn that I could use. I didn't have enough quantities, and I'm really not at this moment wanting to buy lots of yarn, so I'm going to put that to one side, and I am going to make it in the future, but just not at the moment because I'm trying to stash bust. Then we talked about it in the last episode of the podcast where I bought Marie Warlin's Filigree collection, and it's a collection of crochet tops. Some are just crochet and some are crochet combined with a little bit of knitting. From that collection I've chosen Aster, it's called, so I'll put a picture of it in the show notes so you can see. It's a very simple top. It's made with Rowan Panama, so it's a cotton yarn. Now the problem that I've got is, because I'm trying to stash bust, is that I want to use yarn that's in my stash. So I suppose the question is, how do I substitute yarn? How do I know that if I use a different yarn that it's going to work out as it should and isn't going to just look completely different? So sorry, this project uses Rowan Summerlight, not Rowan Panama.
Am I confusing you because mine is Panama?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where have I got Panama from?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, okie doke. So we'll talk about this project first and the yarn, because I have got a yarn substitution. So what you need to do if you're thinking of substituting yarn, so the first thing to do is to look at the weight of yarn that you're going to use. So is it lace weight, is it a 4-ply, double knitting, Aran, chunky, super chunky? So identify the weight of the yarn, that's your first point of call. So for me, the Rowan Summerlight, it's a 4-ply cotton. So then you're looking at the fibre, what's the yarn content. So for me it's 100% cotton, but equally it could be 100% wool
or linen
or a bamboo, or a mix. So what you want to try and do then is to match up a yarn that has a similar composition as well as the same weight. So that's the next thing to try to do. So I'm looking for a floor pie that is 100% cotton, and because I like the finished look of the garment, which is a matte finish, I want to make sure that my cotton is a matte finish and it's not a mercerized cotton, which has like a shiny finish to it, like a little bit of a sheen. So I'm trying my best to stick to the recommended fibre here. But luckily, in my stash, I do have, from about 8 years ago, I'm not kidding you, something called Serdar Calypso. It's a pure cotton, it's a 4-ply, and it even has the same meterage in the ball band as...
It's spot on.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So quite lucky there. It's in cream. This is going to work really well. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. You might want to choose a completely different type of yarn. So whereas this recommends cotton, maybe I thought, well, actually I want it to be a bit more fuzzy finish, so I might want to choose an animal fibre. You can substitute different types of fibre, but you just need to make sure you do a swatch because the finish might look slightly different overall. So then what you need to also do is, I just mentioned the meterage on the ball band. So if the pattern tells you that you need 10 balls of yarn, and say there's 175 metres on each ball of yarn, you need to calculate up the total meterage and make sure that if you do substitute yarn, you have enough, because you might need 11 balls if there's less meterage, or even 12, or you might only need 9. So you've just got to make sure that you're covered in terms of yarn length as well. There is a website called Yarn Sub, and if you type in a yarn that you want to substitute, it very handily lists all the potential yarns that are pretty much exactly the same. Again, you might not have them in your stash, but if you were looking for a cheaper alternative to something, it might be really useful to go and have a look. I had a little play around on it. It's really, really good. That's it really for helping you to substitute your yarn. So once you've got your yarn, you can go ahead and make a tension square. The only thing I would say, if you're going to buy different yarn than that recommended in the pattern, it might be helpful to maybe just buy one ball at first, because if it doesn't then work out when you do your tension square, you might think, oh, actually it's not really suitable, it's not draping as I thought it would, or it's a little bit too thick. So, and then once you've done your tension square, if you were then happy, go ahead and buy the yarn that you need.
And the other way to do it is to buy everything that you need from your local yarn store, keep your receipt, and they will generally always take stock back, especially if they know that you're going to swap it out for something else. But that would allow you to play with the one ball and then either keep the stash that you've got all within the same shade lot, and then be able to return it if you do have an issue.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I've forgotten that yarn shops do that,
Yeah.
don't they? Yeah.
And it's actually easier to do that sometimes in a yarn shop than it is to send stuff back to an online store, I think.
Yeah, well, it just adds more cost as well.
Yeah.
So now Faye's just going to talk about tension squares.
What I'm going to do is probably couch it in wider terms of the project that I've picked as well, because that explains why it is that I've done what I've done. The first project that I want to do it's actually a Rowan pattern by Marie Wallen, of course. And it's available free of charge on Rowan's website. If you subscribe, it's free to subscribe, and then you get access to pretty much most of their patterns, some free of charge, some paid for. But this one is called Liala, I think that's how you pronounce it, but it's Liala, so Liala is how I would say it. And that calls for Rowan, Panama. I had a play around with Panama up at Black Sheep Wools, and they had a sample that they were selling which had been done on it, so I was in a very fortunate position where I could try it on, see if I liked the feel of it against my skin, see if I liked the weight of it. And although the item was knitted, it was actually in stocking stitch, so would have been lighter than my crochet top would have been. I wasn't that keen on it, felt quite dense, and Panama is meant to be on a 3.25mm needle or hook, and Marie's pattern is calling for it to be on 2.5, so it would be even denser. And I just thought, I'm not keen on that, so I'm going to yarn sub for something else. And I went stash diving, and I found a really nice yarn in the most beautiful, vibrant, mustardy green colour. So yeah, so I'm yarn subbing for one that I have, which is a Jeanette Sloan baby alpaca silk 4-ply. It's 70% baby alpaca, 30% silk, so I still have the structure, but actually I like the animal fibre element and having a bit of fuzz. And Yarndale isn't always that warm late in September, so I wanted a little bit of warmth to come off of it as well. But that is clearly very different from Panama by Rowan, so I wanted to make sure that my yarn sub was really going to work, because also this wasn't on the website as a direct substitution. So what I did first of all, because also I have my issues with not wanting to use a 2.5mm hook.
I was thinking that then.
Yeah.
I thought,
So I nearly chose a different pattern because I do not want to make an entire top. It was bad enough doing a 10cm tension square. I do not want to make a whole top out of 2.5mm. I have more to do with my life than that. So what I did was tried it on a 3.5mm hook first of all, so then I could assess the tension on it and assess whether I could make the smaller size, but it would be bigger because it would be on a bigger hook. And so what I did was did a 10x10, checked the tension, and then I wet blocked it as well. So I gave the tension square just a quick dip, but it was sodden right the way through. Gently wrung it out and then pressed it in by rolling it up in a towel, and then I pinned it out to dry on a blocking mat. Now yesterday it was really quite nice and breezy over here, so I managed to actually peg the blocking mat just to the washing line. Actually, my husband came home and Matthew was like, "Of course, that is what would be on our washing line." So I wouldn't do that with a garment. I wouldn't hang a garment up vertically on my blocking mats to dry, but because it was such a small square, it was absolutely fine. Normally I would dry everything on blocking on the flat. The tension had made the fabric increase by 9% over stitches and rows. Had I not done that, I probably would have just forged ahead and done 3.5mm and had a really ill-fitting piece. As it was last night, when I looked at it and thought, I have to do another tension square, I was thinking, can I fudge this and just do it? And then I thought, well, why? For the sake of something that might take me 40 minutes to do, I'll come down to a 3mm hook, and that 40 minutes means that hopefully by the end of this process I will have a top that will fit me really nicely, that will ensure that I'm using the right size within the pattern, and that yarn that I've spent decent money on, although I'm sure I would have got it in a sale, is actually going to be put to proper use, something that's fit for purpose that I want to wear. So I did another tension square, did it on the 3mm hook. I haven't blocked it because I'm going on the basis of averages. It's going to be about a 9% change even with the 3 mil it will be roughly the same. And having done that exercise last night, I was able to do the calculation and say, right, I know that I'm using a bigger yarn, a bigger hook, but I can make the size small, so quicker to do, and it will come out in a kind of a medium to large size for me, which is perfect. Also the pattern is it's not baggy, but because it's crochet, it's not fitted from the top to the bottom at all. And I'm prodding them, I don't know why I'm prodding them. Lynn can tell you, I won't put a photo up of them, but I've got quite big boobs, and the idea of a crochet top just hanging off my boobs, it would be utterly unflattering. So that was another reason for coming away from Panama, because I want something that will just cling a little bit better without being obscene, but something that will just be a little bit more shapely rather than tent-like for me. So we'll see how that goes, but definitely doing the tension squares and blocking one of the tension squares has given me absolute confidence that as I crochet through this project, I've given it the best chance that I can for it to succeed and be lovely. I started a project on Ravelry, and so if anybody wants to dip in and see what I've done, I've put all the notes on tension up there as well. So if somebody was thinking about doing something similar and swapping from row into another, then you can see the differences between my setup and somebody else's.
Just leads me on to my other project actually, Faye, because that does tell you the tension before and after blocking, which is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So for my second top that I'm going to make, my second garment, just as I was pondering what to do, because, well, I didn't have a huge amount of choice laid before me, through the door popped this in this month's issue of Inside Crochet, which is issue 78. And as I was flicking through, I just saw the perfect sweater. It's called Lisa Sweater, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later actually in the magazine roundup, but it does give you the before and after tension square, so I'm going to give that a go later. I am substituting the yarn again, and it calls for Sirdar Amalfi double knit, but instead I've found in my yarn stash a Rowan Pure Life Revive, which is recycled yarn, but it does have a mix of viscose and silk in it as well, so it's quite similar, and it's the same weight. So I'm going to use that for my second jumper.
Gosh, stash busting.
Yeah.
That leads me on to another point. Another reason for me doing the yarn substitute is because Panama is one of the discontinued Rowan yarns, which I'm not specifically gutted about Panama, but I'm gutted about some of the other ones that they are doing away with, like alpaca colour is going, and it's one of my favourite yarns to crochet in particular with. So I was faced with, do I buy Panama, and then if I've got an issue, the chances of me being able to get more of it in the same shade from the same dye lot is next to nothing, and therefore that really pushed me towards the yarn sub. That, and I didn't want to buy a top's worth of more yarn when I was fairly confident that I had some in the stash palace.
I'm sure you have enough have multiple jumpers in your stash palace, babe. Yes. In fact, I can see a whole mound of yarn just from here where I'm standing. That would be enough for 10 jumpers.
You don't need to know how much I've got. It's considerable. But yeah, that's something else to think about, is how long has your yarn been in distribution for? Is it about to come out of distribution? I
have had exactly that problem with my Revive, with my Rowan Revive, because I remember buying this yarn. Somebody gave me one ball of it, and I thought, oh, this is really nice, I really like this, it's recycled, it's nice silk, cotton, recycled viscose. I'll buy some more yarn, I'll make something with it. And I think I bought about another 4 or 5 balls of it, 50 grams, which really in hindsight isn't enough to make a jumper or anything. So it's been stuck in a drawer in the wool nest for since I left work about 5 years ago. So now I was like, oh, I've got the perfect use for it, how exciting. Oh, I don't have enough to make a whole jumper. Yeah. Okay, I'll look online, I'll buy some more. However, it's been discontinued by Rowan, so finding another sort of 4 balls, I need 9. One site had 1 ball, somebody else had 1 ball. I mean, I did manage to find 4, but they were the last 4 on one site. So if you have got yarn that you're thinking of using, identify what you're going to use it for, and if you haven't got enough, I'd recommend, if it's Rowan, if it's one of the discontinued yarns, to just make sure you get what you need now, because it could be quite tricky.
Should we add to the show notes what all of the discontinued yarns are? Because this isn't just going to affect people in the UK. Rowan distributes internationally. I know certainly Tamara, who's one of our listeners, was talking about things being discontinued over where she is in Texas. So this has got a wider remit than just UK listeners. So let's
we have got a list, haven't we? Yeah, so we'll add that too.
And the other thing that I would suggest is, I mean, this is affecting a lot of stores, but I suspect quite a few stores are now selling their stock through eBay. So if you think that you need to bulk up on one that you've got because you're just going to be shy for a project, it's probably worth having a look. If you can't get it within your local yarn store or a yarn store that does online as well, eBay is another option for you. You're unlikely to get the same shade lot, of course, but if you know you've got a project in mind and you need more, I would act quickly.
I won't get the same shade lot with mine, but what I've thought is I've probably got enough to do the front in one shade lot and then the back in another section, in the other ones that I've just recently bought. So fingers crossed it's going to work.
That's good. And that's another point that I was thinking about with my pattern. I don't want to get kind of second sock syndrome with it and do the front and then think, oh, I've got to do exactly the same thing on the back. Because my yarn comes in 50 gram balls and it's not knitting, so it's just a hook that I can take out and put a stitch marker in with, I'm actually going to do them concurrently. So I will do one section of the pattern on the front and then do the same on the back, which isn't going to be that interesting until I get to the lace pattern work, but actually it means that I will speed through the process. I do the same when I'm knitting socks. I know that that process works for me, so I'm going to apply the same thing to my Liala top.
So if you want to join us on our crochet journey, we'd love to hear from you and see what you're getting up to. We'll open a new topic board on Ravelry for this, and then you can join in with us and let us know how you're getting on, and if you've got any questions, or we can help each other along the way. We'll do what we can. And
even if it's stuff that you've already done, show us your finished objects. We'll call it contemporary crochet along, something like that. But yeah, we'd just really love to see what everyone else is up to and what you think contemporary crochet is, because it probably differs quite a bit to what I think it is and what Lynn thinks it is.
So we're going to move on now to our yarn review. Last month I received a lovely parcel in the post from Rooster Yarns, who sent me a sample of Manos del Uruguay Merino yarn to review. So for those of you who haven't heard of Rooster Yarns, they're a family-run business and they're based quite locally to Faye and I here in Cheshire, which is really nice. It's not far away. And they distribute their own brand of Rooster yarn and also Manos del Uruguay yarns.
Oh, so that should be said like Manos del Uruguay. In my head, you just kind of have to do it with a local accent. That was probably not a local accent though.
So if you don't know about Manos del Uruguay, well, basically, Faye's making me laugh now.
Do it.
No, I'm not doing it. It's...
you can't stop thinking about it though, can you?
I'm not looking at Faye, she's a bad influence. So it's a fair trade organisation, not-for-profit organisation, and what it does is it tries to help women in rural areas in Uruguay. They have a cooperative and they spin and dye the yarns, and every skein has the name on the yarn band of the artisan who's made it, which I think is really nice. So the wool is local and the dyes are then made in small pots which are heated by wood or gas, so it's all kind of small enterprise stuff. But what it means mainly is that the artisans who make the yarn and who hand dye the yarn, they're able to provide for their families without having to move into the big cities where there's lots of poverty, so they can actually stay in the rural areas where they belong and earn a living. So I think it's just a great way of helping people. The yarn band that I have, I think a lady called Elta dyed the yarn, so
I think that's a lovely
really
touch,
nice.
that it's got that personality behind it. You know who it is that's made it for you.
Yes, it's nice, but Faye, I have to say, it's lace weight yarn.
Well,
lace weight.
So Lynn left me with a little bit of it last night when when we'd done all the photography for the podcast, and I sat with a cup of tea grumbling little loose weight yarn. But like I say, it's not the yarn, it's the tool. It's the fact that I'm doing it on a really small hook and really small needles. And actually, this is another thing that I learned yesterday as I was doing this. I had to use long straight needles. In the last week, it's the first time I've used them in maybe a year, because I do everything on circulars now. And I love circular needles, they just fit better, they are more ergonomic to my body and the way that I knit. It really is the tools and not the yarn. But I was grumbling last night with 2.75mm hook.
I had to use long needles actually as well, because often if I'm just doing a swatch, I like to use double pointed needles just because they're short. But I was really struggling with the lace weight, so I changed to longer needles myself, and it became a lot easier.
Yeah.
But back to the yarn, it's a lace weight yarn, so great if you love making all these lovely gorgeous shawls. I think there was about 875 yards in 100 grams, which is really
800 meters.
Really great. You know, it's a definite one skein project. Definitely. It's 100% superwash merino as well, so it's really soft on the skin and washable, so that's great. And I think it costs around £16 for one skein, which you might think, oh wow, that sounds a lot, but when you look at the meterage and you look at the 100 grams, you know, it's unique because it's hand dyed. No two skeins are the same. Yeah, but I think the project that I'm using it for, it's one of my own designs. I reckon that I'm only going to use maybe half, if not a little bit more, to make quite a shallow and long shawl. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have enough left to maybe make a short scarf or something as well.
So I'm sure it will. That's really good value for money.
Yeah, brilliant.
And like you said, you're helping a cooperative as well.
So I think what I liked about it, well, I tried it with a stitch pattern that I'm using for the shawl. So it's a combination of double crochet and treble crochet. And then tried knitting with it. And then Faye did a little strip of different crochet stitches, like a treble, half treble, double crochet. Yeah. And I think what fascinated me was the different appearance of the yarn with each of those different samples. So with the textured stitch that I was using in the shawl, it kind of creates a pool of colour, quite a large pool of colour.
And it's a nice even pooling across the colours, isn't it? It's not where you've got one dominant colour and then little splodges elsewhere. It's a really lovely colour combination that comes out with that design.
The colours are absolutely lovely. But then with the knitting sample, as with all variegated yarns, you kind of get in the little strips of colour change. I didn't think that the colours looked as deep and with the knitting.
As interesting with the knitting.
Not getting with the knitting the lovely deep sort of aubergine colour shouting at me, whereas I am with the crochet. Yeah. And then I liked it as well with the different crochet stitches that you did. So I think my preference for this yarn is actually crochet.
Me too. I wasn't keen on the striations with the knitting, and yet flip that last time we were saying with Arna and Carlos, which is variegated but engineered, that definitely to my mind was much better knitted than crocheted. And this one I think it hangs better, although it's a beautifully soft fabric in the knitting. Actually I think the colours, the way that the colours combine within crochet, just suits the yarn much better. And there might be a different knitting pattern that would pull it out better, but actually in the sample I think the moss stitch looks nicer than the stocking stitch.
Yeah.
So you could probably play around a little more with knitting stitches, but I would say it's nicer
it's
crochet.
Nice for crochet. But I suppose if you're using a lace pattern for knitting, maybe I'll try a little bit of lace knitting. It might look different again. Yeah. It's just interesting, the different variations in the surface patterns really. So that's the Marina review, and we'll put all of that on the website and show you the pictures of the different samples that we did as well, so you can have a look yourself. And now we're going to move on to our myth busting topic with Faye. So Faye has been looking at the myth that much more yarn is used in crochet than in knitting. So Faye.
And it is a myth, so excuse me because you might hear some keyboard clunking. and that's because it's all on an Excel spreadsheet. But often when I talk to people about crochet, they will instantly say, oh, but crochet uses up so much more yarn. And I suspect this is one of the reasons why people will be less likely to use wool in their crochet projects than they would in their knitting projects.
Because you think it might cost a lot more.
It's going to cost so much more because there's so much more yarn being used, meterage of yarn. So I thought, well, let's just look at this. So rather than say, oh, that's a shame, or I'm not sure what the answer was, I'd much rather know the answer. So I did 5 different, I say squares, they weren't really squares, but I've taken that into account in my methodology. A stocking stitch square, garter stitch square, double crochet square, half treble crochet and treble crochet in double knitting yarn. And then I've applied exactly the same thing to the chunky yarn, so stocking stitch, garter, double, half treble, treble. And that came out with some interesting results. As much as I've tried to get them all to be the same size, they are not all the same size. So what I've done then is taken the individual weight of each square, and I've used my really good kitchen scales, which go down to 0.1 of a gram. So I've been really super accurate with the weights that I've got. And then I've done the same with the width and the length of each square as well, down to the millimetre. So I plugged them into my Excel spreadsheet. And then what I've taken is the overall square centimeterage of each sample. So then I know what 1 centimetre square weighs. And then I've taken it as though we were doing a tension square and done it on a 5x5 square. So then I can multiply that 1 centimetre squared by 25, and then I know what a 5x5 would weigh. And then I can apply those results across the 5 different squares across the 2 yarn weights. And then I looked at how other people had done it online, and there are a few reviews on this. One of the issues that most people have is that they don't have scales that will go down to 0.1 of a gram. And sometimes people have moved up hook sizes and stuff. So I've kept for the DK was on a 4mm, the chunky was on a 7, and I did the same hook and needle size for both. So we're really comparing apples with apples. And then what I saw on one of the threads was somebody had said, well, does the same apply in lace weight? Grumble, 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 grumble. And here is my hatred of very small hooks. Because I thought, well, if somebody's asked a question, then I wonder if there is a difference, and I should also investigate lace weight. So I've done 5 lace weight squares as well. Exactly the same, stocking stitch, garter, double, half treble, treble, and applied exactly the same numerical thinking behind it about centimetre squared. There is correlation in some of the results across all 3. As you would expect, stocking stitch in knitting is the lightest of the 5.
Yeah.
And you would expect that because that's the type of fabric that it makes. What I didn't expect was that the next one that was heavier than stocking stitch is actually treble crochet.
Right.
So this is where the results start to change a little bit. So on the lace weight, here's the running order. Stocking stitch was the lightest, then it was treble, then it was half treble, then it was garter stitch in knitting, and then it was double crochet.
Right.
And that's the other thing that's always a constant. Double crochet is always the heaviest. As you would expect, it's a very dense fabric and it uses quite a bit more yarn. But interesting that lots of people just say crochet uses so much more than knitting, and it's a constant. They really generalise on it, but actually garter stitch uses quite a bit more than stocking stitch.
Yeah.
And in some of those cases, the garter stitch is using more than some of the crocheted stitches. So then what I've done is taken an average of the percentage increase from stocking stitch. So you actually get an understanding of how much more yarn you might use.
That's a good idea.
If you're not doing stocking stitch but you're applying it to some of the other. And these are averages across the lace, DK and chunky weights. I hope you're all keeping up with this. I will also, I'll probably blog about this and make it available through that with the Excel spreadsheet. So on average, garter stitch will use 51% more yarn than stocking stitch. Double crochet will use 74%, half treble will use 45%, and treble crochet will use 31%. And then I thought, well, I should apply the same thinking and say, well, what's heavier than treble, which is the lightest of the crochet stitches that I have done a sample on, and that leaves 3 options. So again, on an average across the 3 yarn weights, garter stitch used 13% more yarn on average than treble crochet, double crochet used 31% more, and half treble used 10% more. So that thing of just saying crochet uses so much more, yes it does, depending on which stitch you're using. You're using less yarn to do treble or half treble than you are for garter stitch. I don't think you're ever going to beat stocking stitch because it's the nature of it. But based on my methodology and my knitting and my crochet skills, that's what I've come out with. Depends on your stitch, and it is not fair to say that crochet always uses more yarn than knitting. If anybody has a different way of looking at this, or you think my methodology is flawed, let me know. But that seemed to be the simplest way that I could look at this and try and get some answers on, does crochet use more yarn than knitting? It's been really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting as well, because I often wonder why there's no information on the ball band for crochet, because yarn is yarn. It's not knitting yarn anymore. No. I know traditionally most people knitted, but now we have crochet and knitting. Yeah. So, you know, you could be using any knitting stitch. So the tension on the ball band is generally in stocking stitch. So why is there not equally a tension for, say, a treble or half treble?
Yeah.
Just choose one of the stitches like they have for knitting, because you might not be using the stocking stitch, but it's something you can reference against. But equally, it would be really nice if there was something for crochet on there, because there aren't any standard crochet tensions out there.
No, and
as far as I know.
Not even on websites. I've yet to come across a yarn that will put the crochet tension on a website.
And you're just relying now on the designer putting the tension within the pattern, which is great. Obviously you need that, but if that designer is slightly tight with their crochet, it's not necessarily the industry standard. So it would be good to see some industry standard tension information included on the ball band.
And equally, if anybody knows of a yarn brand that does do that, we'd love to fly the flag for them.
I've noticed now some yarn brands do put a little crochet hook on with the size of the crochet.
But it's not all of them.
Recommended, but it's not all of them, no.
Our favourite Erica always does it.
Does she?
Yeah, she likes crocheters.
There are a few that do it actually, to be fair. Have you covered everything there, Faye, with your myth busting techniques? Very in depth, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm done with loose weight. I'm sorry, I'm done with small hooks. But yeah, I'll make this available. We'll put a link through the show notes. But yeah, other people may find it useful too.
Yeah, interesting as well. Thanks, Faye. So we're going to move on now to our magazine roundup. We've got lots of bright, summery colours and themes in all of the magazines. We've got Inside Crochet 78, Crochet Now issue 2, Let's Get Crafting issue 81, and Woman's Weekly June issue, and Simply Crochet issue 45. So we'll put all the links in the show notes to where you can have a look at the projects that are in each magazine. We had a crochet special with Woman's Weekly, so there are some nice crochet projects in there. But I think overall, both Faye and I agreed on our favourite garment from across all of the magazines was the Lisa sweater. That's in Inside Crochet. It's on page 40 and it's by designer Annalise Bayes. It's just a really nice drapey jumper. It's worked in a front and a back piece, and then the front and back are also worked in 2 halves, and you join up the middle. But there's a helpful tutorial in as well on how to do the special stitch that joins it together. So I'm choosing that, as I said earlier, for my
second
contemporary crochet along.
First?
Well, I'm going to start them both at the same time. Somehow.
You're not even second sock syndrome. You're like, I want to do all the things.
So I'm going to swatch for both of them, and then I'll just get going, I think, on both of them at the same time. You'll be able to follow my progress on that one and hopefully see me wearing it at Yarndale. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to making it. I'm looking forward to making them both, actually. But when that popped through the door and I saw that, I thought, oh yeah, I can see myself wearing that.
And usually you and I have got reasonably different taste, actually. So it's unusual that out of all of the magazines that we've looked at, we have both picked the same kind of, let's say it's like a star make, that's the thing that pops out that thinks, I would actually make that. So that's it, we both would
agree.
pick the same one.
Fantastic.
And when you do it, you'll also do a Ravelry page for a project page, is that right?
Yes, I will do. Yeah, I'll set it all up on Ravelry. So fingers crossed, I will not fall behind, Faye. And by Yarndale, I'll have a finished article. So that's the magazine review, and we're going to also now chat about our finished objects and our works in progress. So how have you been doing, Faye? I mean, I know you've been so busy doing all these squares. I don't know how you do it. It's ridiculous.
So I finished off a pair of the John Arbon socks that I kind of started last time round. And again, I'm doing that as a bit of a study because I'm introducing a stripe into the sock, and I want to find out what the best way is to to knit a stripe into my socks without really showing the jogging. So I'm on sock number 3 of that study, and that will stretch to sock number 4, but I've got 3 different methods, and again I'll do that as a blog review. It's just really interesting. It speaks to my precise nature that I need to try and find the best route, and that'll do it in a very methodical way. So I finished one pair of them, but then of course that's just been replaced by me doing exactly the same pair of socks, just using a different stripe method. One finished, one back in. So it doesn't it's probably not even worth mentioning, frankly, because it's just been like the revolving door. I have finished Winky's scarf, or I've finished the bit that I can do on Winky's scarf, and he received it, I think it was on Saturday, so I've got photos of him with his scarf, cute. Even though it's really, really hot on the south coast. Winky loving his scarf, and the minute he opened it was saying, "Mummy, can we please crochet now?" Which I just love. So yeah, there's been very little, those 2 things, and then the squares for the check-up on crochet versus knitting and yarn weights.
So for me, I managed to finish a shawl that I was messing around with a pattern for, pattern design. So it's not really for anyone in particular, although when my daughter came the other day, she did start draping it around her shoulders, saying, "Oh, this will keep me warm on the
I'm guessing
on
that
the
was
long boat."
Kate. Yes, this is Kate.
Not on the barge.
No, you have to be very correct.
Use the correct terminology on the long boat. But she said, perhaps in a different colour. So
I'll have one of these, Mother, but just not in this colour.
So I finished that one off, and I started the Manos Marina shawl. Equally, I'm just messing around with a few ideas. So I'm hoping to finish that one because I'd really like to get the pattern out there, because I think it's a nice pattern for people to follow. Let me think what else I've done. I think that's pretty much it really for me, other than work projects, which don't really count as whips and finished objects, to be honest.
One of the reasons we've got fewer finished objects is because we're recording the podcast a little bit earlier this time because of holidays, and also that the first Friday of the month is the 3rd, so it's really quite tight on timings and we don't have that much leeway, so it's been a harder job to get time to craft and do bits and pieces. There's just been less time in between recordings.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for me really, and apart from doing the sample swatches, I haven't really done a great deal. I haven't even moved on with my whips from last time. I mentioned the Odaletta shawl that I'm
you
making.
were on it with that one.
I was like,
yes,
going to finish it.
You have to do that.
I think I'm going to take it on a holiday with me because we've got a long drive to get down to Southampton. So 4 hours, I could actually finish it in 4 hours, I reckon.
So, okay, there's a challenge.
Possibly.
So when you come back,
I don't know.
You're going to be adorned in your Odaletta shawl.
Yeah, because as well, I was tidying up the wool nest again a few weeks ago. I had a proper clear out and threw more things away. You'll be horrified to hear, but the really awful things that I've made. I'm thinking, why am I keeping these?
Yeah,
this is very nice. I don't need to keep all of my samples of every project that I've made because they're building and building and building. So I have to keep it manageable. But in clearing up the wool nest, I found a really nice little wooden tube. And I'm thinking, what on earth is this? It's only really slim, like a cigar kind of shape, and the lid, it kind of has a little lid that comes off. And then I remembered a couple of years ago when I went to visit an aunt, an elderly aunt, her husband gave it to me and he'd made it. Inside was a 1.25mm crochet hook, which is what you need for beading. Oh, you could borrow it, Faye. I could lend it to you and you could try with it. It's really fine, but if you want to, if you haven't threaded your beads before you start a project, so you can either thread them all on at the beginning, which I should have done for my shawl, but I wasn't going to use beads. Now I've come to the beading bit and thinking, I need to add a bit more weight. Do I snap the yarn? I don't really want to do that. So you can, there is a way to add beads individually with a tiny weeny crochet hook. I have the crochet hook from Tidying Up the Wool Nest, found the perfect tool.
Nice gift via your aunt and uncle.
Nice hand-me-down tool that he made, which I shall keep. So that's where I haven't got up to with my Odaletta shawl.
But when you come back,
I will have
when I see you brown and like post-holiday, you will have it on. And I will take photos, listeners, because Lynn will do this. Her head is down.
I'm not listening. So, have you moved on with your shoreline blanket, Faye?
Yes.
You do
Actually,
a bit of that?
That's a fair point. I've done another chunk of that. I'm probably just about 3/4 of the way through.
It's looking great.
I'm really pleased with it, but because it's old wool that I'm using, it's got a bit of a smell to it, and I just can't wait to finish it and wash the flaming thing. But also I want to be able to use it. But it's so beautiful that I've had it hanging up in the Girl office as well, and it's actually quite nice as a
piece of
a wall hanging. Yes, so it might go one way or the other. I'm quite chuffed with it, and I still, every time I crochet on it, I'm thinking about all the listeners all over the world.
That's lovely.
It's really nice.
So I think that's it really for our FOs and whips. I think we've updated the whip wall because we added Catherine to it, didn't we, from Crafting in Treats. And we've probably got, I don't know if we've got anyone else to add to it at the moment, have we? Not yet.
We have a few irons in the fire for next interviews,
I think
which we should probably note on that one. What we'll do is always have a monthly podcast like this one, where it's Lynn and I going through and doing yarn reviews and talking. And then if we do an interview, the interview will always be as a separate episode. So we'll call it a bonus interview episode, something to that effect. So, because we quite like doing in-depth interviews, and if you don't like listening to the interviews, then it's a very quick way of you still getting this content without having the interviews. That said, our next interview that we'll do is about 10 minutes long, so that bit doesn't apply. But it will go out as a separate bonus interview.
And then we just have one more little thing to share with you. Faye and I are writing a book together jointly as the Crochet Circle with 8 crochet accessories. So 4 will be designed by me and 4 will be designed by Faye.
Very exciting and quite nerve-wracking.
So we've just been looking at our yarn choices and looking at yarn support, and we've had some great responses from that. So we'll probably say a little bit more as time goes on.
We have a deadline in mind,
but
we don't want to make that public in case
we don't.
You never know what's around the corner. So Lynn and I are quite dedicated to what we do and getting stuff out on time. So I'd rather mention it when we know that we're a little bit closer to really achieving that deadline. But it should be this year.
Yeah, and it has a really interesting theme to it, so it's not just like, oh, here's a few crochet accessories together. There is a theme to it, there's a reason for the booklet. So as I say, once we've got a little bit further down the line, we will share that with you. But it's really exciting, and we've really enjoyed the process so far, designing up the different projects.
And it is another reason why you will possibly see fewer whips and fewer finished objects from us, because there's quite a lot of time and dedication going into getting the right patterns and the right look and feel for the booklet. So that will be hard copy and digital, and with the digital downloads we'll do it with UK terminology and a different download with US terminology, so hopefully we can cover everyone.
Yeah,
excellent.
We have another fabulous competition for you. We have been given some Rooster Delightful Lace by Rooster Yarns. I'll put all the company details in the show notes. So this is for a lace weight blend of 80% baby alpaca and 20% silk. And it's a 2-ply lace weight yarn, so it's great for knitting lighter garments and shawls or crochet.
What hook size does it require?
Well, 2-ply, very thin. So yeah, it says 2 to 4 millimeter needles. So I suppose it depends how short or tight you want your stitches to be, or how lacy you want it to be.
That would be a 10mm hook.
Big holy sure. Again, it's a little bit like the Manos really, in that it has a fantastic meterage on it. We've got 800 meters for this 100-gram hank, so fantastic.
And it's a beautiful colour.
It's a really lovely,
kind
lilac-y,
of lavender,
yeah,
amethysty, beautiful, but actually quite a strong colour as well. It's not
wishy-washy, no, not at all. It's called Talara. So if you look on Rooster's website, you'll see the shades, the different shades. So it's colour 623. We'll put full details of how to enter the competition on Ravelry, and the competition will run until the 30th of June, and then we will draw a winner using the random number generator as we normally do, and we'll let you all know then.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. So finally we have What's Good. So what's good, Faye?
I am off to a knitting retreat. Well, when I say knitting retreat, it's actually just more of a crafting retreat. So one of the podcasts that I listen to, it's by a really lovely lady. She's great fun. She's called Louise Hunt, and she has got the Caithness Craft Collective podcast. That's a bit of a mouthful.
This is a tongue twister.
Yeah. I've probably been listening to Louise for the best part of 6 months now, and she's got a massive back catalogue of podcasts, and I think I've done most of them. Really spent a long time catching up. So she's holding a retreat this weekend, which is back up in my old stomping ground. It's where I grew up for the first almost 6 years of my life, up in Caithness, not far from Thurso. So when it came up as an option, Matthew said he'd buy it for me for my birthday present, which isn't until July, so I'm getting an early present as well. While I'm having hopefully a lot of time to craft. It's been a busy few months setting up the business, and I'm looking forward to just having a bit of time, having a bit of working on my Liala crochet top.
Well, that sounds really nice, Faye. So for me, again, I'm going away as well next week, which I'm really, really looking forward to. I just need a break, just need to switch off really, and I've had some busy months.
Shawl.
Yes, but I'll probably do that in the car on the way, because I won't probably do it on holiday. I think I might annoy my husband if I do that. He puts up with me enough knitting and crocheting all the time at home. So yeah, for me, a holiday, I usually don't do any crochet or knitting. I just have a holiday and try to just empty my mind, so that when I come back I'm like ready to go and really got lots of ideas. I've taken a notebook with me because I always can't stop my head from going, so you know, you can't switch it off. It's not that easy to switch your mind off. So yeah, just make notes if anything exciting pops into my head. Oh, that looks like I could do that. So looking forward to that, and then back from holiday it'll be getting stuck into the book that we mentioned earlier, and also the other book that I'm doing with Search Press, and visiting Woolfest.
So Woolfest is, I think we're going up on the Friday, which is the 24th of June. So if any of our listeners are also going up there on the Friday, and you want to meet up for a bit of a crochet session and a coffee, then let us know. We'll happily kind of sort ourselves in a little location somewhere at Woolfest. Yeah, and they do good coffee, and they do really nice cakes at Woolfest, and music, so you can sit and have a little jig and crochet away and sup your tea or coffee.
Yeah, that sounds perfect actually. That'd be nice, something to look forward to.
I know a few people have said that they're planning on going, but I don't know if they're going on the Friday or the Saturday. So we are definitely going on the Friday.
Yep.
Lynn had a sharp intake of breath when I told her that she might have to leave with me at 7:30 to get there on time.
They goes really early to places, but yeah, I'll be there. I'll be fine.
Do you know what? If I paid the ticket price,
no, I agree, Faye. No, I mean we kind of early risers anyway because of school and everything, so it's just a bit of an extra hour, isn't it, really? It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. 5:30, that's when we'll have to be away. I'm joking. 7:30.
My eyes nearly popped out of my head then. What?
7:30.
7:30 is fine. It's absolutely fine. So we'll be able to tell you all about it in our next episode.
Yeah, and I might buy more wool.
I might buy wool as well. Now that I'm getting more addicted to these lovely fancy yarns that Faye encourages me to buy.
It's all about quality.
Yes, I agree.
So I think that's it, isn't it?
I think that's it
covered
for today, yes.
we wanted
in great
to
depth,
cover.
in part.
Yeah, we'll try and make good sense of the show notes, and like last time, we'll point you to where other bits of information will be rather than trying to cram everything into the show notes. But I would encourage you, if you want to see more of what we're up to, we're starting to use Instagram a little bit more. Pinterest, we put a load of extra photos up in Pinterest for the entire episode and stuff that we're working on every month. So there is a board for each episode. So if you want a little bit more detail, that's one of the nice places to go to get the information. And then of course we're also on Twitter, and our individual email addresses are on the contacts page of the show notes. So if you need to get in touch with us about anything, then feel free to do so. But yeah, we're done. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for listening again.
And we'll be back in July.
We will.
Bye.